Hi, my name is Allison Pennell Townsend. We're going to be talking about the brain and some of its parts and functions. I have two drawings I'll be looking at with you. The first one has the lateral ventricles. So there are four internal chambers of the brain, or ventricles. Uh, Two of the ventricles include the left and right lateral ventricles. They create an arc in each hemisphere. Now the other ventricles aren't that easy to see. The third ventricle is actually located deep in the brain. It's inferior to the corpus callosum. And this yellow spot you see here is what I have demonstrated as the corpus callosum. So the third ventricle is inferior to the corpus callosum. The fourth ventricle would be located between the pons and the cerebellum. So somewhere in here between the pons and the cerebellum. And just more information about the ventricles. The ventricles are the major site of the cerebrospinal fluid. This fluid can be found in the ventricles, the central canal of the spinal cord, and the subarachnoid space of the meninges. It provides buoyancy so the brain can stay suspended inside the skull, protects the brain from bumping into the skull, and provides chemical stability by removing certain wastes from the central nervous system. Now, there are four main regions of the brain. In this drawing, you can see I have the brainstem. The brainstem is the lowest portion of the brain and is continuous with the spinal cord. It has three major areas: the midbrain, which I have indicated in red. The midbrain functions as a relay station between higher brain centers and the brainstem. The pons, which I have indicated here in blue, to me it almost looks like a coffee bean. But the pons contains nuclei that aid with respiration, sleep, and posture. Then we have the medulla oblongata. It contains several nuclei. They regulate heart rate, blood pressure, and breathing rates. Another brain region is the diencephalon. And the diencephalon contains two primary areas, the thalamus and the hypothalamus. Here I have the thalamus indicated in green, kind of in the center of the corpus callosum, and the little blue square rectangular shape here is the hypothalamus. So the thalamus directs sensory impulses to the appropriate region in the cerebrum. The hypothalamus is the link between the nervous system and the endocrine system, and that it controls the pituitary gland. It also contains several nuclei responsible for maintaining homeostatic functions such as thermoregulation, hunger and thirst, and sleep cycles. And in this picture, I have indicated the pituitary gland with this little purple circle mark here, just down below the hypothalamus. Brain region 3 is the largest and most complex portion of the brain. That would be the cerebrum. I have it indicated in pink, this whole area outside here. The cerebrum's landmarks include gyri, the ridges or folds of the cerebrum, sulci, the valleys or the more shallow grooves, and fissures, which are the deep grooves in the cerebrum, such as the longitudinal fissure. So I'm going to use my other drawing again here. My other drawing here, I have drawn more of the gyri. The gyri would be the mountainous type figures here in the brain. The sulci would be the shallower grooves. The longitudinal fissure is what actually separates the left and right hemispheres of the brain. So again, the fissure is a deep groove in the cerebrum. And so again, going back to the longitudinal fissure, it separates again the right and left hemispheres of the cerebrum. The hemispheres are connected by a large bundle of myelinated axons called the corpus callosum. And I've already referenced the corpus callosum. In this picture, it is the yellow C-shaped figure. This item allows the hemispheres to communicate. So the cerebrum contains the cerebral cortex. Now this is a thin layer of densely packed gray matter on the surface of cerebral lobes. So I don't have this labeled, but it would be on the surface of the cerebral lobes. All right, and the cerebrum has 5 lobes. Here we have the frontal lobe in the front. About halfway back with the cerebrum on your head, the parietal lobe would begin here. The parietal lobe leads right into the occipital lobe. We also have the temporal lobe, which would be kind of around your ear area. And we also have the insula, which the insula is actually not visible from these diagrams. That it actually would be, the lateral sulcus is right here. The lateral sulcus divides the frontal from the temporal lobe. So the insula is deep within the lateral sulcus area. So those would be the 5 lobes. Now the frontal lobe controls voluntary motor functions such as skeletal muscle control and higher level cognition. The parietal lobe is primarily responsible for receiving and interpreting signals of the general senses. The occipital lobe is the principal visual center. The temporal lobe, back over here, the temporal lobe processes hearing and smell. And again, the insula functions in understanding spoken language and taste. And the last region of the brain is the cerebellum. The cerebellum plays a major role in coordination of skeletal muscle functions, such as balance, posture, complex movements, and speech. So again, here is the main drawing that I provided for the brain, and my additional one showing the lateral ventricles, the longitudinal fissure, the frontal lobe on this one, the parietal lobe, and the occipital lobe. The Uri being the mountains and the Sulci being the valleys. Thank you.